Welcome to Anchor Point and to another podcast. I'm joined today by Trevor Greenaway again, who's going to be talking to me about the theme of this week's Carers Week, which is visible, valued and supported. And we're going to be looking at how that relates to family members' experiences after brain injury. Trevor, could you just start by introducing yourself, please, and also giving a bit of an overview of what happened to Harvey?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm a husband and father of three boys. Harvey is my middle son, and when he was 16, unfortunately, he was involved in a road traffic accident, which left him in a coma for a month. He had a craniectomy to remove a piece of his skull to keep him alive, and then he stayed in the hospital for 3 months. And then he transferred to the Oxford Centre of Enablement, which was the rehabilitation centre in Oxford, where he remained for a further sort of 4.5 months. And Harvey today, we're 5 years on, and he's done, incredibly well considering the initial diagnosis, but it's still a challenge. And that's really us.
Okay. So one of the things that's often talked about in the literature around brain injury is this idea of brain injury being a hidden disability, that although there are physical symptoms that go alongside it, quite often individuals struggle most with the more invisible forms of the disability, the cognitive impairment, the behavioural issues, the emotional problems that go alongside it. But it seems to me that concept of hidden disability or hidden nature of brain injury actually stretches past that to family members as well. So Trevor, could you tell me a little bit about your experience of being an invisible carer, if you like?
Yeah, definitely. I think, if I could sum it up, Ali, and I wrote this down earlier, but unless you've lived this, you simply cannot understand it. And our family got thrown into something that nobody can be prepared for. And the medical care that Harvey got while he was in that medical institution, if you like, was second to none. It was incredible. And, we are as a family indebted to everybody that kept him alive and got him to where he was and that continues to help him. We'll never forget that. As a family, we were completely invisible, Ali. Nobody in that whole journey, nobody ever asked me, my wife, my other children, my parents, who were, late 70s at the time, how are you coping? How are you? Are you okay? And we didn't know, because we were thrown into this, how important that was. I now realize 5 years on, which is why I'm a part of Anchor Point, because I want to help other families recognize that there isn't anything out there at the moment. And therefore, if you don't know where to go and where to find the support that you need, you're going to really struggle like we did. So I think invisible is a good word, because we were invisible to the medical community while we were there for 8 months. Nobody took time to focus on us as a family. When we left the medical world, sadly, it was like we fell off a cliff. We were completely invisible. Nobody ever even explained to me that you realize you are now the carer, yes. And that your family are now the carers, particularly you and your wife. Do you feel equipped to be that carer? Do you understand what that means? Are you trained to be the carer? And obviously none of that. We were just joyous to be home, finally. And then you deal with the impacts of a brain injury, as you said there, the anger outbursts and the change of identity, and particularly in the early stages. And it's really, really, really hard. And I think you're invisible, so at least you think you are, even with your closest friends and family, because they mean well and they try to help, but you realize in time that it's hard for them to understand. And that's why I'm very, very passionate to work with Anchor Point, because I cannot believe that the social system allows this to happen and that the government let this happen. And I cannot understand why the NHS would not train the medical professionals on looking after the families, because at the end of the day, we are the care package. You know, whether we like it or not, we are the care package. And I think, you know, I think one last thing, Ali, is when I think about the word invisible, you know, when we left, I'd never claimed benefits in my life, so I didn't understand. I didn't know what we were entitled to, available to. You know, obviously, I'd lost my business. We were now full-time at home. And it was sad. I had to go to the Citizens Advice Bureau and ask some lovely lady, elderly lady, who was less clueful than I was as to what do I do? And I didn't even know. Harvey should have had a social worker, but somewhere that fell through the cracks. We didn't start claiming disability allowance for nearly a year because nobody told us we could. Why would I know that? And in the meantime, we needed it. I think back to, you know, we needed a disabled badge, Ali, not because Harvey couldn't walk 9 bus lengths, which was what the question was on the disabled badge sheet,
Yes.
which I filled out very honestly. He could walk 9 bus lengths by that point. But what that did to his fatigue and his mental well-being was profound. And I think what I learned was we were so invisible that in the end, I got the courage to write to the CEO of Oxfordshire Council. And, you know, I'm not proud of it, but pretty much said, this is appalling and I will go to the press. And suddenly we got our disabled badge. We were helped with the EHCP. We were given the allowances that we were entitled to. Why did it take that? And how many families have got the energy left to be able to actually go and do that? Very few. So yeah, we definitely felt like we were invisible, for sure.
Now, you've touched on some of the answer to this next question already within that concept of being invisible, but it sounds like you also felt quite undervalued or unvalued as a family member. So can you describe how that felt for you and for your wider family?
Yeah, I think the honest answer to that, Ali, is it hasn't really changed from the day we left hospital to now, 5 years on or 4 years on from then. You know, nobody has ever knocked on our door or written to us and asked us, how are we doing? How are we doing with the care of our son? And how are we doing from a mental point of view? Because this has a profound effect on everybody in the family, not only the direct family, but, you know, the grandparents and brothers and sisters and people that are massively affected by this. So still to this day, that question has never been raised to us. It's always about the patient. So I think that's why I'm very passionate that this has to change, you know. And I guess Harvey's very lucky, Ali, that he has a strong, supportive family around him. As I've learned in this journey, that is very often not the case. And if you don't have that supportive framework around you, then who is the carer? Is it any surprise so many of these poor people end up in our jails and in situations that are not their fault?
Yeah, and interestingly, undervalued so much that there was never even any question mark raised by the medical profession over you being a carer, or any identification that you may need some support within that role to be able to do that for Harvey. So how well supported did you feel in your role as carers for Harvey?
Totally unsupported, you know. And I still feel this way. You know, I ran a successful business, and, you know, I've lost my business because the business I did involved lots of international travel, and I simply couldn't do that anymore. I don't resent that, but clearly that's had a big impact on us as a family. You know, the focus we have 100% is on making Harvey the best he can be, and that's the best investment we could make. But I do feel frustrated. I feel let down. I feel angry that we weren't supported. you know, the one thing I think we were very lucky with as a family is the OCE have a family psychologist department. And I think I was very lucky that just at the point when Harvey was actually leaving the OCE, I recognized that I needed help. So did other members of my family. So, you know, we were at least given some psychological support, which was invaluable. But I now realize, I also realize that we were the lucky ones because we live in Oxford and because my son was in a good rehab center. You know, that sadly is not the case for so many. And I don't honestly know how you can cope with being a carer if you are struggling mentally, when nobody ever taught you how to be the carer or what to expect. So I feel very let down.
Yeah. Thank you, Trevor. And I think your story really nicely highlights the whole point of this Carers Week, of the idea of the importance of carers being visible, valued and supported, because actually, as your story demonstrates, you offer a valuable service to Harvey that would not exist elsewhere in other services, and yet you're not given that value or support in the role that you do. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and for highlighting that so clearly. And thank you to everyone listening for joining us today for this podcast. And just to leave you with that final point, that it really is important that all professionals that are working within this field of brain injury do consider how they can support family members as well as the individuals themselves, so that the prognosis is better for individuals and for families. Thank you.